Prince Harry and Princess Anne have finally said what many inside the palace only dared to whisper. They can't hide it anymore. A royal confrontation, buried history, and a shocking revelation about Queen Camilla's rise has shaken Buckingham Palace to its core. Say, what secret could unite Harry and Anne against the crown's newest queen? Stay with us as we uncover the truth that's splitting the royal family from the inside. Because what happens next may change the monarchy forever. The royal night that changed everything. It began with glittering silverware, sparkling chandeliers, and an illusion of harmony that only royalty can stage. The setting was a grand royal banquet, one of those rare moments when the family sets aside their public roles and gathers in splendor behind palace walls. The air was filled with the delicate chime of champagne flutes and murmured toasts, a picturesque evening tucked away from the prying eyes of the world. But beneath the surface of grace and gold-plated protocol, tension simmered. And then, in a moment no one saw coming, it boiled over. Princess Anne, stoic, composed, and famously sharp-tongued, broke the silence with surgical precision. She turned to Camilla, looked her in the eye, and with deliberate calm said the words that sliced through the room. "You are the queen consort, not the queen." The effect was instant. The clinking of glasses stopped. The laughter ceased. Even the orchestra seemed to hesitate. Time froze, just for a second, as one of the most respected members of the royal family publicly challenged the woman who now wears the crown beside King Charles. What had always been whispered in corridors and murmured in parlor corners was now spoken aloud, and not just by anyone, but by the daughter of Queen Elizabeth II, a woman whose loyalty to the crown has never wavered. In that chilling, stunning moment, the palace became a battleground of principle, protocol, and legacy. No shouting, no theatrics, just a line drawn in the most royal way possible. It was not merely a personal disagreement. It was a confrontation rooted in history, a defense of tradition, and the start of something much larger. From that night forward, the equilibrium inside Buckingham Palace began to shift. A storm had been brewing for years, and now the thunder had spoken. The confrontation wasn't reported in the press. No official word was released. But those within the family knew. The walls of the monarchy had just absorbed a quiet earthquake. The question was no longer if change was coming, but how deeply it would shake the crown. And at the heart of this upheaval stood a woman who had always been underestimated. The reluctant rebel. In the ever-evolving theater of royalty, Princess Anne has long played a unique role, one not driven by glamour or gossip, but by grit. She doesn't seek the spotlight. She rarely makes headlines. And yet, when she speaks, the entire palace listens. The second child and only daughter of Queen Elizabeth II, Anne has carved her identity not through titles or pomp, but through sheer, relentless dedication. For decades, Anne has been the monarchy's quiet backbone. With over 20,000 public engagements under her belt, she's earned a reputation as the hardest-working royal, famed not for ceremony, but for substance. While others pose for cameras, Anne laces up her boots and shows up. She travels, she listens, she works. No frills, no fuss. Just duty. It's a trait that made her beloved in Britain and feared behind palace doors, because, with Anne, there is no mask. She calls it as she sees it. Her decision to forego royal titles for her children sent shockwaves when it was first announced. In a family obsessed with hierarchy, Anne made it clear that service means more than status. That bold defiance of tradition wasn't a rebellion. It was a statement of integrity, and it's why, even when nicknamed her royal rudeness for her brusque manner, she remained respected, trusted, anchored. So when Anne confronted Camilla, it wasn't petty, it wasn't emotional, it was deliberate. She wasn't acting out of jealousy or rivalry, but out of something far deeper, the solemn vow to uphold the legacy her mother spent a lifetime building. And when Anne acts on principle, she does not waver. Her role in the family is unshakable, not because of who she married or what she wears, but because of what she represents, the unfiltered voice of tradition, of duty, and of the queen who came before. And now, as the monarchy shifts under a new reign, Anne stands at the crossroads, perhaps unwilling, but unquestionably ready, to challenge the forces that threaten to rewrite what her mother held sacred. And behind her stance lies a quiet but profound promise, one whispered in the Queen's final days. A promise to the Queen. Before the grand procession, before the black armbands and global tributes, there was a moment, private, sacred, and known only to a select few. In the final weeks of Queen Elizabeth II's reign, her legacy weighed heavy on her family, especially on her daughter, Princess Anne. It was in these intimate hours, beyond the cameras and royal briefings, that a promise was made, a daughter to her mother, a royal to her sovereign, and it would change the fate of the crown. According to insiders close to the late Queen, she had been unequivocal about one thing. Camilla was to be Queen Consort, not Queen. It was more than semantics. It was a matter of legacy. Elizabeth understood the public's love for Diana. She understood the delicate balance of acceptance that allowed Camilla back into the royal fold. But she also understood that tradition mattered. Titles carried meaning. History had weight. And honoring the crown meant respecting its scars. Anne heard her mother's words. She absorbed them not as a suggestion, but as a mandate. And in her quiet, resolute way, she promised to uphold that final wish. For Anne, it wasn't about Camilla. It was about Elizabeth, about truth, about honoring the institution as it was meant to be, not as some wanted to mold it. And since the Queen's passing, Anne has kept that promise alive with unwavering resolve. She reminded Camilla gently at first, in private conversations, reportedly telling her, "You know what she wanted." But when those reminders went unheeded, when Camilla began to move deeper into the seat once reserved for monarchy's most sacred occupant, Anne knew it was time to act. That banquet confrontation wasn't an emotional outburst. It was a line drawn in honor of a vow, a final promise made in the shadows of grief, now spoken aloud in the glitter of a royal hall. And in that moment, Anne didn't just defend her mother, she defended the memory of Diana, the judgment of history, and the fragile soul of the monarchy itself. But as Anne took her stand, another force was already moving quietly through the palace, redefining alliances and tipping the balance of power in unexpected ways. The silent power shift. Every kingdom has its whispers. In Buckingham Palace, they echo through centuries, passed not just in council rooms, but in knowing glances and subtle gestures. And lately, those whispers have turned into cautious warnings. Something is shifting. Not with banners or declarations, but with the slow, strategic influence of a woman many underestimated, Camilla. Since marrying Charles in 2005, Camilla has played her role with tact. She kept to the background, earned respect through charity work, and slowly rebranded herself from the infamous other woman to a matriarch in waiting. But as Queen Elizabeth's reign ended, Camilla stepped forward, not just into public view, but into power, and not everyone noticed. At first, she began attending high-level briefings. Her circle of advisors quietly expanded. Her voice was heard more often in palace strategy sessions, and though her name was not yet etched on the throne itself, it loomed larger in palace decisions. What had once been protocol was now preference. What had once been tradition was now adaptation. Anne saw it first. She recognized the signs, subtle changes in ceremony, shifts in seating arrangements, subtle deference that hadn't existed before. For Anne, it was a red flag. Camilla was no longer content with being queen consort. She was redefining the role, recasting it in a way that didn't just challenge titles, but upended the very structure of the royal inner circle. Behind closed doors, loyalties were tested. Staff realigned. Charles, caught between sister and spouse, became both king and mediator. His choices weighed not only by politics, but by personal consequence. The court had begun to split, not in revolt, but in allegiance. This was no longer just about etiquette. It was about control. And in a house built on image and illusion, the struggle for influence had taken on a new form: silent, strategic, and dangerously real. And as the lines hardened behind the scenes, one truth became clear. This feud was far older than anyone was willing to admit. A feud decades in the making. Long before Camilla wore a crown, or even stepped into the palace, she stepped into Princess Anne's past and left a mark that would never fully fade. In the early 1970s, Anne was deeply involved with Andrew Parker Bowles. Their relationship was real, passionate, and by many accounts, destined for something more. But royal protocol crushed their plans. Andrew was Catholic, and under royal law at the time, Anne could not marry him. Duty prevailed over love, as it so often does in royal lives. Heartbroken, Anne moved on. But Andrew didn't vanish from her world. He married Camilla. For Anne, it was a double betrayal. She lost a man she cared for, then watched him bind himself to a woman who would later step into her family's most sacred circles. As years passed and Camilla re-entered Charles's life, Anne kept her distance. She remained polite but cold. Behind palace smiles was a wound that had never healed. At Charles and Camilla's wedding in 2005, Anne's body language spoke volumes. Stiff, detached, reserved. She made no effort to hide her disapproval. And when Camilla began to assert herself inside royal walls, Anne's quiet disdain only deepened. The past, once thought buried, had returned with a crown. And for Anne, Camilla's growing role wasn't just uncomfortable, it was intolerable. Now, decades later, that old hurt fuels a modern power struggle. What began with heartbreak has morphed into a battle over identity, tradition, and the soul of the monarchy. And as the history between them resurfaces, so too does the question that no one dares ask aloud. Is this really about titles, or is it about revenge? The unhealed wound. Time may pass, but wounds left unattended have a way of festering in silence, especially within the walls of Buckingham Palace. For Princess Anne, her icy demeanor toward Camilla never needed words. It was etched in the tilt of her head, the coolness of her gaze, and the silence that lingered just a beat too long whenever they shared a room. It wasn't mere disapproval, it was memory, history, a slow-burning resentment rooted not only in personal betrayal, but in a belief that something sacred had been trampled under the weight of ambition. When Anne attended Charles and Camilla's wedding in 2005, it wasn't a gesture of unity. It was an obligation. Observers noted the distance between her smile and her eyes. The Queen's only daughter, proud and stoic, stood apart, physically and emotionally. And even as years passed, her continued closeness with Andrew Parker Bowles only added friction. Camilla may have worn the ring, but Anne had the history. That tension never disappeared. It simply learned to sit quietly at state dinners and official functions, wearing pearls and diplomacy like armor. To Anne, the concept of bloodline matters. Royal lineage isn't a costume to be worn or a role to be claimed. It's a birthright, steeped in centuries of service and sacrifice. And no matter how many crowns Camilla wears or titles she holds, she will never be royal by blood. That's a line Anne has never allowed herself to forget. Nor, it seems, has she forgiven anyone else for crossing it. But the silent feud between the women has become more than a private matter. It's now spilling over into public life. And as Camilla's influence grows, Anne's resistance hardens. A clash, once dismissed as personal, is beginning to feel like something more dangerous. A confrontation between two visions of the crown. The monarchy, already walking a tightrope between modern relevance and ancient tradition, now faces a dilemma that no coronation speech can resolve. Because this isn't about optics anymore. It's about ownership of legacy. And as the crown passes into Charles's hands, another moment rises. One that placed Anne directly into the center of history once again. Dressed not in diamonds, but in armor. The coronation statement. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, but sometimes a single entrance is worth far more. When the world tuned in to witness the coronation of King Charles III, they expected tradition, elegance, and pageantry. What they didn't expect was a scene stealer, not Camilla, not even Charles, but Princess Anne. Clad in full military regalia astride her horse, she didn't merely arrive, she announced herself. And not with fanfare, but with fierce, unmistakable symbolism. It wasn't a costume, it was a message. Anne's role that day wasn't ceremonial fluff. She served as the official gold stick-in-waiting, an ancient role rooted in protection and honor. But the optics told a deeper story. As Camilla stepped into her new title as queen, Anne's commanding presence served as a silent rebuttal. Camilla had the crown, yes, but Anne had the legacy. Camilla had the title, but Anne had the blood. And on that stage, the difference between the two had never been more clear. To the public, it was regal. To royal watchers, it was revolutionary. Anne had become a living emblem of her mother's monarchy. No frills, no flash, just discipline, dignity, and deep roots in tradition. As Camilla smiled from her throne, Anne rode ahead, head high, eyes forward, a protective force in plain view. It was a visual coronation of her own, a coronation of influence, not rank, of history, not headlines. That moment may not have been scripted, but it didn't need to be. Because in that single unspoken act, Anne had made something abundantly clear. She had not stepped aside. She had not surrendered. And she was not about to let the memory of her mother and all the monarch stood for be overshadowed by a woman whose story had been written in scandal. But while Anne's symbolism commanded the spotlight, the person standing between her and Camilla faced a choice no king should ever have to make, between the sister who bore the burden of the past and the wife shaping the future. Torn between sister and wife, he waited a lifetime for this role, 70 years in the shadow of a mother whose reign defined a nation. And when the crown finally settled upon his head, King Charles III did not enter a blank slate. He stepped into a throne already weighed down by ghosts. As monarch, Charles holds the power. But as a brother and a husband, he is caught in a crossfire of loyalty and love that no title can protect him from. On one side is Anne, his constant, his confidant, his comrade in duty. They were raised under the iron discipline of Queen Elizabeth II, bound together by a childhood devoid of softness but rich in service. Anne was the one who never wavered, never asked for praise, never faltered. She is the embodiment of their mother's legacy. And now, she is the voice demanding that it not be rewritten. On the other side is Camilla, his partner in life, the woman for whom he risked public scorn, familial disapproval, and decades of tabloid torment. He fought for her acceptance. He endured for her dignity. And now that she stands beside him as queen, he cannot, will not abandon her. But Charles's silence in the wake of Anne's confrontation speaks volumes. He did not correct Anne. He did not defend Camilla. He stood between them, visibly strained, visibly still. Perhaps he knew that no matter what he said, someone he loved would feel betrayed. And perhaps he also understood that Anne's words weren't just a personal attack. They were a warning. The crown he inherited came with conditions. Camilla's role, while publicly accepted, is still haunted by history. Anne isn't just questioning Camilla's title. She's questioning the very direction of the monarchy. Charles knows this, and every day his reign continues under the weight of this division, one that no royal decree or ceremonial march can resolve. The balance is fragile, and the public is watching. And while Charles contemplates how to hold the family and the nation together, public opinion has already begun to speak, and not everyone is clapping for the Queen. The public verdict on Camilla. The story of Camilla is one of the most dramatic transformations in royal history, from pariah to consort, from villain to queen. But for many in the public eye, forgiveness doesn't equal forgetfulness. Even now, with the crown atop her head and decades of charitable service behind her, Camilla walks in the long, looming shadow of one woman, Princess Diana. The Queen of Hearts, as the world named her, still holds a sacred place in British memory. A beacon of compassion, a martyr of circumstance, and the woman Camilla was once blamed for replacing. When Camilla and Charles married in 2005, the tone was cautious. The ceremony was civil, quiet, understated, almost as if it were ashamed of itself. Even the Queen stayed away from the actual vows, joining only for the blessing afterward. The message was clear. This was not a royal fairy tale. It was a compromise. Since then, Camilla has worked tirelessly to reshape her public image, advocating for domestic abuse survivors, supporting animal welfare, championing literacy. She has proven, time and again, that she is more than a scandalous past. And yet, the stain remains. To many, Camilla's ascent feels unfinished, conditional, even uncomfortable. She smiles, but the people's affection has limits. Her name still evokes whispers. Her presence especially when juxtaposed against images of Diana, still feels jarring. And now, with Anne challenging her authority and Charles caught in between, the cracks in Camilla's crown are becoming visible again. Public polls continue to show more admiration for Kate, Anne, and even the late Queen than for the new Queen herself. For a monarchy that relies on public trust, that's a dangerous gap. Because no matter how far she rises, no matter how much she contributes, Camilla cannot rewrite the beginning of her story. And as the monarchy faces renewed internal divisions, the people are once again forced to ask, who truly belongs on the throne? The answer, for many, lies not with crowns or titles, but with memory. And nowhere is that contrast more sharply felt than in the quiet but growing rift between Camilla and the one woman who embodies the people's love today. Royals, rivals, and resentment. Within the palace gates, power is rarely loud. It's silent, stylish, strategically placed in smiles, gestures, and who stands nearest the king. And lately, an unspoken rivalry has taken shape, one that the public sees only in fragments: Camilla versus Kate. At first glance, there shouldn't be a feud. Camilla, now queen, and Kate, the future queen, have very different roles, different eras, different journeys. But beneath the surface lies a competition that's less about status and more about acceptance. Camilla has spent decades trying to earn it. Kate, by contrast, gained it almost instantly. From the moment she stepped into the royal spotlight, Kate was beloved. Elegant, composed, charitable, she echoed the grace of Diana without the tragedy. The Queen admired her. The public adored her. Even the tabloids, always hungry for scandal, had little to weaponize. In Kate, many saw the modern monarchy done right. And for Camilla, that stung. Sources close to the palace whisper that Camilla once doubted whether Kate could handle royal life. She thought the young commoner might crumble under pressure. But Kate thrived. Every royal event, every press encounter, every global tour, she passed with flying colors. And with each success, Camilla's own struggles became more apparent. Though always civil in public, their relationship has been marked by cool diplomacy, smiles for the cameras, distance in the corridors. It's not hostility, it's history. And it's playing out quietly in how influence is shared, how events are hosted, how attention is divided. Kate doesn't just represent the future. She represents a kind of redemption for the royal family. A do-over, a Diana 2.0, minus the heartbreak. And as her star rises, Camilla's position feels increasingly fragile, fought for, but never fully secured. And while the royal family tries to present a united front behind the palace doors, the rivalry simmers. Because in a world where perception is everything, one woman has the crown, but the other has the people. William's cold diplomacy with Camilla. There's a reason Prince William rarely speaks publicly about Camilla. His silence isn't accidental. It's calculated, deliberate, and cold. Since childhood, William has watched the story unfold. He lived it from the inside. While the world speculated, he knew the late-night calls, the awkward silences, the tears behind locked doors. Diana's heartbreak wasn't a tabloid headline to him. It was home. Though time has passed and appearances have softened, William has never truly embraced Camilla. His interactions with her are respectful but remote, cordial yet distant. And unlike the warmth he shares with Kate, or even his occasional public camaraderie with his father, there's a chill when he's with Camilla that even the palace curtains can't hide. Behind the scenes, aides have long said he's watching, observing, waiting, not out of spite, but out of loyalty to his mother. And quietly, he has already begun shaping the future. There are whispers that when William takes the throne, Camilla's title and influence could be reevaluated. It's not vengeance. It's clarity, a correction. And in the silence between them, one thing rings louder than any speech. William has not forgotten. He has not forgiven. As his power grows, so too does the quiet recalibration of the monarchy's inner circle. And while the world focuses on Charles, it's William's shadow that's beginning to stretch across the palace walls. The ghost of Diana still haunts the crown. No matter how many portraits are painted, how many crowns are polished, or how many protocols are rewritten, Diana remains. She lives in memory, in myth, in the way the public compares every royal woman to her, especially Camilla. Even in death, Diana shapes the monarchy's emotional core, and no one feels that weight more than those now wearing the titles she once held. Camilla cannot escape the comparison. Every charitable appearance is measured against Diana's compassion. Every smile, every headline, every gesture, shadowed by the woman she replaced. It's not just legacy, it's a ghost. For Charles, Diana is the past he could never outrun. For William, she is the truth he vows to protect. And for the public, she remains the soul of a monarchy they once believed in. The monarchy may move forward, but it moves with her specter always just a step behind. Because Diana wasn't just a princess, she was a reckoning. And the reckoning isn't over. The People's Princess 2.0. Where Camilla struggles to be accepted, Kate simply is. Elegant, composed, and driven by service, Kate Middleton embodies everything the public once adored in Diana, but with a quiet strength that's entirely her own. She's not chasing the spotlight, yet somehow it always finds her. Her journey wasn't sudden. She spent years studying, learning, adjusting, not just to royal life, but to the weight of expectation. And now, she stands not only as William's partner, but as the monarchy's most visible symbol of hope. The people see her as genuine. The Queen saw her as steady. And even Anne, famously reserved with praise, has shown Kate a rare kind of respect. Her popularity isn't a fluke. It's earned. And as Camilla fights for footing, Kate floats. Gracefully. Unbothered. Loved. In her, the public sees a future that feels familiar. And finally, forgivable. Prince Harry's echo in the palace walls. He may be oceans away, but Harry's presence lingers like thunder in the distance. His exit fractured the royal narrative, and his memoir shook it to its core. In those pages, Camilla was painted not as a misunderstood figure, but as a calculated one. For Harry, she wasn't a stepmother. She was a threat to his mother's memory. Though William chose silence, Harry chose fury. And in doing so, he gave voice to the whispers Anne had long been too royal to say aloud. Every time Harry speaks, the palace listens, even now. Especially now. His alignment isn't with Charles, or even with the institution. It's with Diana, and perhaps quietly, with Anne. Together, their shadows stretch across the monarchy. Because no matter how far Harry runs, the house he left still echoes with the sound of his mother's heartbreak. The royal family on the brink. The crown is no longer just gold and velvet. It's tension. memory, legacy. And now, with the Queen gone, the lines once drawn in soft pencil are etched in stone. Anne has declared her position. William has drawn his own. And Charles stands between them, torn by blood and by love. Camilla may hold the title, but her grip on power is more fragile than ever. Behind the palace walls, the question isn't just who wears the crown, but who defines it. Anne is protecting the past. Camilla is reshaping the present. William is preparing the future. And all of it, every decision, every silence, every confrontation, leads to one inevitable truth. The monarchy is no longer just a family. It's a battlefield. The royal stage is shifting, and now the past is fighting back. From Anne's bold stand to Harry's echoes of Diana, one thing is clear: nothing stays hidden forever. If this story surprised you, hit like, subscribe, and let us know your thoughts below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.